lot of people like Tucker Carlson and like Megyn Kelly, yeah, they've been consistent on this part of Middle East policy, but I think they are sort of looking for a place where they can sort of dismount. They're kind of looking to the future. What's the Republican Party?
Are you concerned about the growing influence of political extremism, hyperpolarization, and misinformation? Well, you're not alone. This is the American Values Coalition podcast, where we explore the root causes of these societal ills and provide you with strategies to counter them. A lot of turmoil this week going on with MAGA world related to Iran and some other things. To help me discuss this and kind of process what's going on, my guest is John Daly. He is co-host of the Reagan Caucus podcast. You can find his commentary at bernardgoldberg.com. And previously, he had some columns with National Review and a bunch of other places. He's also a novelist, I hear, for anyone who reads books. Do people still read books? So there's some books out there for if you're interested in some fiction. John Daly, welcome to the American Values Coalition podcast.
Well, thanks. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Nap. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So I'm so curious and interested about what's going on in MAGA world these days. There's just seems to be a lot of turmoil over many issues, but especially just recently our can we call it war with Iran? The administration doesn't call it that, but our war with Iran has caused a lot of MAGA meltdown taking place. So what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's, we have the war in Iran. Like you said, people are sort of hesitant to call it that, but I mean, it is a war. I think it's strange that they're sort of dancing around that. I guess the part of that's to sort of get out of, the idea of having to go to Congress for this. I've seen it called an operation. But yeah, it's, we're at war, and there is sort of a split that I'm seeing, in MAGA world and really the broader right. I mean, I think it's the interesting thing to me is that Donald Trump, campaigned heavily on, and his people campaigned heavily on the idea that he was, the peace president. They're always lashing out at the neocons. We couldn't nominate Nikki Haley because she's a warmonger. She would bomb Iran. We couldn't have that. and then Trump was reelected for this second term and has bombed Iran and he's in the middle of what appears to be regime change in Iran. And it's funny because now when I criticize Trump online for anything, his supporters are still calling me a neocon while cheering on everything he's doing with Iran. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, I think a lot of people, there is a split. We have some MAGA people and some non-MAGA people on the right that support what's happening right now with Iran, the regime change. That at least that's what they hope it leads to. There's a lot of uncertainty, of course, but there's a lot of support for the military efforts and the objectives. And then you have sort of the other side of the aisle, the Tucker Carlsons, the Megyn Kellys, the others who are kind of sticking to the previous MAGA line of not getting involved in these conflicts, not getting involved in the Middle East. And so there's a lot of differing viewpoints, I guess, on this. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I now that we've committed to this operation, to this war, I'm hoping we do get regime change out of it. I'm hoping the current regime is hurt badly enough where these uprisings that we've seen in the months leading up to this, lead to something much better for Iran, a better future for the country. So we'll have to see.
Wow, you're very hopeful. But yeah, I hate to give Tucker Carlson credit, but there's a group there of MAGA folks who are being consistent on this, right? Mm-hmm. And then it seems like there's another group that's just their views just depend on whatever Trump's views. If they change with Trump, and so there's really no center to it. But yeah, it's been interesting to watch the folks who really believed in the like no more war stuff, and that was like really a big part of their support for Donald Trump, and seeing them, their reactions not just to this, but we had Venezuela first, and then
Oh yeah.
all this talk of Greenland, and and now I guess Cuba is next, according to Trump. He's been very very open about Cuba. So I don't know. Are we going to have troops on the ground in Cuba before the midterms? I have
Yeah.
no idea where this is going.
It's hard to say. I mean, there's so many, it's even the people that are broadly supportive of what we're doing in Iran right now really should have a lot of questions. I mean, I hope what is happening leads to something very good for that part of the country. But the frustrating part for me is that you look at the administration has been having a lot of trouble really making they didn't really make a public case for any of this. I mean, you have a lot of people, a lot of Americans don't really pay much attention to foreign policy to begin with, and so it actually came as a big surprise to them when this war started in Iran that we were even thinking about doing this, even though in the weeks leading up to this, all these military assets were being moved to the region. But there's a lot of confusion, and you really do. You should blame. The administration does have some blame for that. First of all, they didn't go through Congress. They should have. I don't buy the arguments that the administration has given for not going through Congress. I don't think it was a timeliness issue in which they didn't have time for Congress because of we heard Rubio talk about the imminence of an Iranian strike on the U.S. and U.S. interests. But it's I mean that I don't think that was true. I think we know it wasn't the nuclear weapons issue because that's been buried under rubble since last summer. Their program. I mean they obviously still want to do that, but they were a long ways from getting back to that setup. But yeah, I mean, the proper thing would have been to run through Congress, not just to get more buy-in from Congress, but to get more buy-in from America, because Congress is closer to the people, and they can get this. They can make a case to people, they can persuade people, and that really didn't happen. And what we have heard since then has been a pretty weak, slow, and convoluted public case from the administration. There's a strong case to be made. It just hasn't. The best people out there making it are outside of the administration right now, which is kind of ironic. You have John Bolton out there every time he's in front of a camera making a far better case than the administration has, and the administration hates Bolton. This is kind of a weird setup. But there is a case. Iranians are responsible for killing hundreds of Americans over the years. What they contributed to the Iraq war, the IEDs. They have killed tens of thousands of their own citizens. The Iranian regime. They support terrorism around the world. They attack their neighbors. They should not be allowed to have nuclear weapons. They've proven they're not. They would not be a good steward of that. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's that there's a big question there. It's amazing that we've made this extraordinary commitment, and there's still not a great public case for it, even though that's been presented anyway. There is one. It just hasn't been presented by the administration. And now there's this question of how long is this going to take? You've seen a matter of weeks thrown out by Pete Hegseth. I don't. I always thought that was a mistake to plant that seed in people's head that this is going to be done in 2 weeks. This is going to be done in 4 weeks. I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, I think it would have been smart to say hopefully this will happen quicker than weeks and months and all that stuff. But I think by throwing out numbers is kind of a mistake. And another frustration for people who do think this, should be taken as seriously as possible is, I think there's some evidence that Trump did foolishly think that this might be somewhat similar to the Venezuela operation, that it might be this one in and one out sort of thing. And he likes those. I mean, he doesn't want to commit troops, which is understandable, to the ground. But I think he may have been sold on this idea that it was going to go as smoothly as Venezuela did. It couldn't possibly, but he may have actually believed that. But yeah, it's I think there's a lot of nuance to be had. Wanting a free Iran, wanting this regime gone, and also having some reservations about how it's the administration is going about it, whether the competence is there to get it done the right way. We've strained a lot of relationships with our allies going into this situation, and so you don't know how reliable in some cases they're going to be to this effort. So yeah, there's a lot of questions for sure.
Yeah, and on the one hand, we're thinking about Iran, and we want what's best for the Iranian people. Our thoughts are with them. My heart breaks for the children who were bombed. During this,
Oh
the
yeah.
school that
Yeah,
was
that needs to
bombed.
be looked into for sure, and they are looking into it. And I think it is going to turn out that was unfortunately a U.S. strike that did that. Um, it's heartbreaking. It's
It
absolutely
is.
heartbreaking. It happens unfortunately in war, but I think that's probably where the investigation is going to conclude, is that was a U.S. strike, a mistaken one.
So let's bring this back to the U.S. because, of course, one question is, what effects it might have. Of course, we're already seeing the effects in the news this morning that the price of oil spiked really high. That's going to have effect on gas prices, which is going to have an effect on prices of almost everything else. Anything that gets delivered by gas is going to go up. We have that, so that's going to be in effect as well. And then, like we started with the split within MAGA, is that still going to matter by the midterms, or are they going to all come back together and
Yeah.
say vote Republican, or is this more of a permanent, like, no, we're done with Trump, we're done with the MAGA movement kind of split?
Yeah, it's interesting because it was when Trump spoke out against Tucker Carlson, and kind of called him out pretty hard for Tucker's criticism of what Trump was doing with Iran. Tucker did sort of back down a little bit. He kind of said, "Well, I love Donald Trump. This we just disagree on this." I think MAGA will, regardless of where it goes. MAGA is ultimately about Donald Trump, and I think there always was going to be a point at some point where Trump was seen as a lame duck in the second term, and that people were going to feel more comfortable going against him. We've already seen a little bit of that, but I think a lot of people like Tucker Carlson and like Megyn Kelly, yeah, they've been consistent on this part of Middle East policy, but I think they are sort of looking for a place where they can sort of dismount. They're kind of looking at the future. What's the Republican Party? What's the American right going to look like when Trump no longer has the influence that he currently does? And I think they're trying to find out what's going to attract the largest audience. To be honest, and as far as the midterms go, I think that the Republicans were going to be doomed regardless of this. They were obviously going to lose the House. I mean, the numbers just kind of, there's no other real answer there. They're going to lose the House. They may lose the Senate. I think if things don't go as smoothly as a lot of people are hoping in Iran, I think that could only hurt the Republicans more. But there are, the reason they're hurt now, the biggest problem they have in this second Trump term is the tariffs and prices being too high, and that was none of this has made sense from the beginning. Many a few decades back, Trump found this romantic connection to tariffs. He thought they were the greatest idea he's ever heard of. He doesn't really understand how they work. He never really has, but he really wants to use them. Part of it's been to leverage personal gain out of this. He loves it when he puts the squeeze on these other countries, and then they send out these dignitaries to kiss his butt and give him gifts and tell him how great he is, and then he lowers their tariffs down. It's tough for businesses to plan. It makes everything more expensive for Americans, and whenever he repeals tariffs on certain items or on certain countries, you see that the economy gets better on the front. That these things get cheaper. It's just he wants to put himself in between the U.S. economy and our relationships, our business relationships, our trade relationships with other countries to get things. In some cases, he just doesn't like these other countries. He doesn't like Canada, so he throws these big tariffs at them, and that's caused problems as well. But yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot of things the American people are willing to overlook if prices are low and the economy is good. And that's we're not really seeing prices are not low, and we're seeing lots of bad numbers for the economy, including the jobs numbers. So that's a big deal as well. A lot of it goes back to tariffs. Some of it goes to AI, I think, as well. But if Trump were tomorrow, stop this trade war stuff, embrace free market, free trade principles. I think things would look a lot better, in the months between now and the midterms. But I don't think he's prepared to do that. He loves this tariff idea. He loves getting in the way of commerce. He loves the power it gives him, all the kissing up he gets out of it. So I think he's going to find ways, even with the Supreme Court, overturning the emergency tariff powers that he's been using. He's looking for other ways to continue these tariffs, so looking for other loopholes. They're not particularly persuasive either, and I guess I'm thinking they'll be shot down in the courts at some point as well. But that takes time. We had these crippling tariffs for almost a year before the Supreme Court was able to knock them down this first time, and it takes a while to get through the courts, the cases, and so I think we'll be dealing with this right up until the midterms. And yeah, I don't see a really great scenario where things start looking a lot better for the Republicans going into the midterms. But you never know. Maybe there's something I'm not thinking about.
And speaking of issues that have split MAGA, sometimes I've heard this Iran operation also being called Operation Epstein Distraction. So that there's another issue that has definitely split MAGA world. Of course, Marjorie Taylor Greene has left her position, no longer in Congress. But yeah, you have a lot of folks who really wanted to some justice on the Epstein issue, who are not being satisfied with where the Trump administration is going.
Yeah, the whole Epstein stuff, and I think I mentioned when we were emailing back and forth now, but I haven't paid as close of attention to this, but it's there is some deep irony that you had the Epstein case, you had all the stuff that was going on with the Department of Justice and going back to the Biden administration and before, and I think the Trump administration before that, but this became like a really hot political issue going into the 2024 presidential election, and it was more Donald Trump's surrogates who really made these huge promises. I think he did a few times as well, but really made these huge promises that there was this Epstein cover up, that if we need Trump back in office to look into this and get the names, release the names of the Epstein client list, and that was sort of a big case for getting Trump back in office to do this. And then so they kind of blew it up into this huge political story. But it became clear pretty quickly that Donald Trump did not want this to be a big issue, because he had links himself with Epstein. He has people around him who had, I think, even more incriminating links with Jeffrey Epstein. And it's really embarrassing. I'm sure there's a lot of embarrassing stuff there that doesn't look good for the administration. In addition to high profile Democrats, that was always sort of a strange positioning for a lot of the MAGA crowd for me, because they were convinced that what was going to come when more information was released from the Epstein files, that all of these high profile Democrats were going to be the ones getting outed. And people, I don't, for whatever reason, kind of forget that Donald Trump was a lifelong Democrat until he decided to run for president. And so, yeah, he very much traveled in those circles. They had a relationship. It was known, a business relationship, and a friendship as well. So yeah, I don't know why any of this is a surprise, and Howard Lutnick he's another one now who's very much in the administration, very much in MAGA world, and he's had even closer ties than people realized. Steve Bannon as well. He's getting outed for having. So I guess none of this stuff when people independently go digging into this stuff, there's actually a lot of people in MAGA world that were in Epstein's orbit. So it was always sort of strange to me that MAGA was so intense on outing all of these names that were in these files. And so I don't think you mentioned when you first asked this question, Nap, about whether this is a distraction from Iran. My tendency is to think this wasn't done because of the Epstein files. I mean, I'm sure Trump would rather people be talking about just about anything rather than Epstein. But I'm not prepared to believe that this moving on Iran is because of the Epstein files, is to get people to stop talking about it. But you're right. It has created again a rift in MAGA world. Although I think people were coming back home off it already. I think Trump made it clear he'd rather people not talk about this. The late Charlie Kirk, before he passed away, he was a big get to the bottom of this Epstein stuff. Until a few months before he was killed. He was saying, I don't think we should talk about this anymore, because Trump didn't want people talking about it. He was very compliant with Trump, and I think a lot of people were.
Who was he talking to?
Yeah, we really shouldn't.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't talk about this because the Democrats they're jumping onto this and they're using it. I think they were more than happy to stay out of this issue for a long time until they saw how much it was sort of imploding in MAGA world, and so they decided, to make it a political issue as well. And I mean, who could blame them at that point? Because the politics were thrown right in their face, and so they're taking advantage of it. And then it's funny to see people back on the right look at the Democrats. Well, why are they bringing this up now? And I'm like, because you guys brought it up. Before that, it's become a big political hot potato. That started on the right, and the left is now jumping on it as well. But yeah, I mean, it's a complex situation. I mean, Epstein was a terrible guy, of course. I mean, you can't say anything good about anything related to him, really. I mean, there was lots of victims. I sometimes, it's bad that they're sometimes, I think, getting overlooked in all this, in the politics of it, because they went through a lot of things, and they're absolutely, they're sympathetic figures for sure, and they deserve justice. And but it's become such a political weapon that it's, I think, the true, what's been horrific about Epstein's legacy is sometimes gets sort of overlooked.
So let's talk for a second about the racist wing of MAGA,
Okay.
because there have been three things recently that happened that came to my attention. So the first was, in South Florida, the Republican group in South Florida started a group chat especially for Republican college students, and apparently it quickly delved into racism and anti-Semitism, so that became a big story. It's published in the New York Times. Over the weekend, I shared a clip from William Wolf, who worked in the first Trump administration, and now he's the executive director of the Center for Baptist Leadership. It's an organization that believes the Southern Baptist Convention isn't MAGA enough, so it's trying to push it in an even more rightward direction. And there was a clip of him saying that he's defending mass deportation because he says he wants his children to grow up in a country where they are not minorities, and he doesn't want his children growing up in a country where people don't look like him. And he's saying, he's defending it, saying this is a Christian thing to believe, and this is not against the Bible. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing, just this morning, I don't know if you saw this, but Representative Andy Ogles, he's a congressman from Tennessee. He posted on X, Muslims don't belong in American society. Pluralism is a lie. So it's just shocking that maybe I should stop being so shocked about this stuff, but it's just like becoming so commonplace. Even a member of Congress and some really high profile folks who are sharing this deeply anti-American and racist and xenophobic and bigoted against Muslims and Jews and that sort of stuff. Um, are you seeing some of the same things?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I didn't see the tweet you talked about there at the end there, but it doesn't surprise me, I guess. But yeah, I've really been shocked by a lot of things over the past few years, especially in regard to anti-Semitism on the right as well. I mean, we saw it on the left after the attacks on Israel, that horrific invasion that led to this 3 year, offensive from Israel that has really weakened Iran and all this. But we saw a lot of this stuff from the left on college campuses, some really sick protests, some verbiage thrown out there.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff on the right, and you talked about different forms of bigotry, but I guess just to start with anti-Semitism. Yeah, I was sort of surprised, especially uh, and I heard about this more from younger people after I talked to them more, but I didn't realize this was as big of a deal on the right until you started seeing sort of the blow up with the Heritage Foundation and the people working there and sort of the tolerance, and part of it too was right after that we talked about Charlie Kirk earlier with his assassination. But you had that no enemies to our right sort of philosophy where we now the political right has to align with bigots, anti-Semites, Nazis to ultimately defeat the left. And I was stunned by that. And I'm a longtime conservative. I was pretty active in the Republican Party pre-Trump. Back from during the Obama years. And I was always, defending the right against claims from by the left, of racism. I mean, it's not that there wasn't any racism; there obviously was, but I felt like it was such a political tool, and so often it was unfair. And I feel like just in this Trump era, especially as it goes on, I feel like the right has basically sort of lowered itself to the left's expectations of what the left has long believed the right is. They basically sort of, in
Mm-hmm.
many ways, and not everybody obviously, but sectors of the right have sort of taken this attitude of well, you guys have always thought we are like this anyway. Now we're gonna be like this, or and I don't know if they actually look at it that way, but that's how it kind of it sort of feels. But yeah, we've seen the rise of Christian nationalism, where people have I don't know if that's led to this in increments, but there is become sort of a tolerance of certain forms of bigotry. It's become more mainstreamed, and I guess part of that's kind of the absence of guardrails. There used to be when somebody a high profile figure on the right would say something clearly racist, the party would sort of jump on him. And now I think there's sort of a more of a tolerance for that. They don't want to push away someone who might vote for our side, and so it's over time. I think it's become more accepted on the political right, unfortunately, and I think we're kind of seeing it in various forms right now. And part of it's still sort of hard for me to believe just how brazen people are and how people are willing to say things like what you mentioned, the congressman tweeted out. Uh, I don't know what to make of it. I think it's just the lifting of the guardrails, the lifting of shame. I think people are in this. We're more combative in our politics, and people are willing to say stuff that is more provocative without putting it through a filter, without having people around them telling them, "Okay, you don't want to say that because that's ridiculous." I think people are just kind of willing to throw it out there, and it's not a good thing.
Yeah, and if I could end on a hopeful note, maybe as this becomes more vocal, hopefully there are other folks within the MAGA community who reject that and are able to sort of wake up and see, the sort of folks that they've been in coalition with, and hopefully are able to speak out, against what they're seeing.
Yeah, and just to go to that, I mean, we did see, and that was a good sign. When you had people that were proposing this idea of no enemies to the right, you did have people that were pretty sunk in MAGA world, willing to go along with all kinds of stuff, including January 6th, the downplaying of that, the rewriting of that. For some people, it was, the anti-Semitism becoming more pronounced on the right was a line in the sand. And there was a point where people were no longer, a lot of people on the right, influencers and political commentators, were no longer afraid to criticize Tucker Carlson and were much more willing to criticize Candace Owens so that, I guess, that was a good sign. It's sort of disheartening that it took something that profound to get people to finally take a step back. Oh, look what's happened on the right. We should probably say something this time. And so yeah, that has been heartening. I guess that has been a line for some people. But there seems to be a lot of tolerance of it still as well. I wasn't expecting Megyn Kelly to go in the direction she did. I will say I hate I really am uncomfortable with talking about Megyn Kelly, and that's kind of, you mentioned my books earlier. So I was a big fan of Megyn Kelly years ago when she was still at Fox. I thought when Fox was going very Trumpian, she sort of held the line. She was sort of a voice of reason over there. She wasn't afraid to criticize Trump. She took a lot of heat from her colleagues over there for not going through this transformation that they were going through that was in the interest of ratings. We saw her speak out against Roger Ailes, her colleagues, that upset her colleagues as well, with the Me Too stuff. When she ended up going to NBC, I thought she got a really bad rap over there as well. I mean, she was treated very badly, and I had a lot of respect for how she conducted herself back then. I thought she held her integrity. I actually asked her if she wouldn't mind blogging one of my books. She was familiar with me through my writing, and she did. She was kind enough to read my book, give me a nice blog, and I still appreciate it. We had a few candid conversations through direct messaging, DMs that I thought I won't reveal what was in them, but we had some pretty good, conversations about some meaningful things. I felt I had a pretty good read for who she was, and I was still very impressed with her. And her return to the media has shown her go in a direction that I don't recognize. I still have this gratitude. She helped me out professionally with my books and everything, but it's so disheartening to me to see where she has gone, and I think it's a lot of it's for audience share. She's trying to really catch up to the MAGA train that she was a very late arrival on, and I think she's trying to kind of find ways to maintain this huge audience, and some of those techniques are ugly, and I assume it's infected her thinking. I don't think all of this is just for show, but I just it's disheartening to me. I thought a lot better of her before, until the past couple of years, that she's gone in a direction that I think is very unfortunate.
Yeah, it's been amazing to watch. Yeah, I just think it's so important for folks in the media, when you have influence like that, just to figure out a way to stay grounded, so you're not like taken over by,
Right.
this, whatever
And,
it is that happened, search for ratings or what your news feed or whatever it is.
yeah. No, there's a lot of reason that people do what they do, in the political media. I mean, we've heard a lot. We know the story pretty well of the guys from the Dispatch, how they left Fox on principle. I'm talking about Stephen Hayes and Jonah Goldberg. They
In reaction
remained.
to Tucker Carlson, but
Yeah, yeah, and those two, while they were still at Fox, they remained true to themselves, And you could see where Fox was inviting them less and less often on their shows. I mean, they used to be mainstays on the special report panel with Brett Baer at the end there. They were regulars, and the audience, the longer Trump was the leader of the Republican Party, the audience did not want to hear right-leaning commentators on there criticizing Trump. So they were asked, they went from being on there a few times a week to once a week to once every 2-3 weeks to once every 6 weeks. You can see that happening. So I think a lot of people saw that, and they saw that once Trump put out that, or I'm sorry, not Trump, Tucker put out that, was it Patriot? I can't remember the name of that documentary now, but that was the last straw for them, and they left the network. A little bit lesser profile of a very similar situation was the guy one of the people I work for, Bernard Goldberg. I've written for his site for years, but he was a Riley Factor regular for, he was on every week for years, and he was constantly, his segment on the O'Reilly Factor was the highest rated every week. So O'Reilly's was the highest show, his was the highest segment on that show. But he was a kind of a rock star over at Fox News, but he would criticize Trump, and they would try to O'Reilly, and then he ended up getting fired or left or whatever, but Bernie stayed with Fox News after that. But yeah, whenever he was on, the commentators would try to kind of steer him, always to criticize the left side of the media. He's the author of Bias. He's talked a lot about liberal media bias, but whenever he would start criticizing Trump, you could see the commentators kind of tighten up. Bernie would get all kinds of hate mail. Fox News would get all kinds of hate mail. They couldn't have. It's okay for someone on the left to go on Fox News and speak critically of Trump because they're the foil, they're the villain. But if someone on the right, like Bernie is doing it, they can't have that, because it seems then it's kind of this criticism may have legitimacy. So. Yeah, the story with Bernie, they did the same thing with him. They started inviting him on far less often. And at some point, they just stopped. And so they let him sit at home. I think he had like 11 months left on his contract that he wasn't on Fox at all. And then they just let it run out after that. So it's wild. So you go from one of the most popular people on Fox News to just a pariah within a couple years' time, all related to the people's perception of Trump. So yeah, there's if you are a political commentator that leans right, and you're not servile to Donald Trump, you're really putting a lot of obstacles in your way professionally, as far as whether you can succeed or not. If you go hardcore MAGA, as many people have, the sky is kind of the limit. If you have the right personality and the media presence, that obviously plays a factor as well. But it is much easier to rise to notoriety and make a lot of money in political commentary if you just jump on the Trump train and hang on to it for dear life and say things that are provocative, and that's gonna be it's a much easier route to succeed professionally, unfortunately.
John Daly, you can find his writing at bernardgoldberg.com. Also, check out the Reagan Caucus podcast. Where do you mostly post? Is it on X or Blue Sky or?
X. Yeah, you can find me at John Daly Books.
John Daly Books. Check him out on X. Thanks so much for joining the AVC podcast.
Sure thing, Matt. Thanks for having me on.